Now, I'm not sure how many people are actually going to be searching for this, but I was going to pick it up day one anyways because I'm a huge nerd for this stuff, so basically let's go ahead and do this. Michael here with a PC overview for Cyberdimension Neptunia for Goddesses Online. It finally ended up coming to PC. It was on PS4 for quite a while, and it released in Japan even earlier, so it's not exactly a new game, but it's new to PC, so I'm definitely going to end up checking it out. And so that people know what the PC port is all about, I'm going to go ahead and do a video here. We're going to be talking about performance, and the port and stuff like that, and we'll get into the config file stuff. One thing to mention, though, if you are a Neptunia fan and you haven't actually seen anything from this game, it is an action RPG. Not like Action U or anything, but it's more along the lines of an actual action RPG. I'll show gameplay a little bit later, and I'll get into my thoughts later on. And I will be doing a full review, so if you're wondering on the quality of the game, maybe you're not a Neptunia fan, but you're curious on the game itself, I will be doing a full review a little bit later. But today, we're just going to be talking about the port, and then I'll give some early impression stuff after that. So let's go ahead and go into the config, because so far, the port itself is actually pretty good performance-wise, and I haven't actually had any major problems with the port itself. However, you will notice here that none of these things are explained whatsoever, but we actually get a nice selection of options here. So we actually have window size, which you'll notice is crossed out. The way they actually do resolution is with screen resolution. So here you're actually able to get your window mode, and then you actually are able to select a nice selection of resolutions, including different aspect ratios and stuff, which is actually kind of nice. But if you go in full screen or borderless, it's just going to render to the full monitor, which is actually super, super nice. You can't select which monitor you want it to render to, but that's perfectly fine in my opinion. Quick editor note, I mentioned this later in the video, but I forgot to mention it at the beginning of the video, so I'm just going to do a quick edit here. Basically, when you start the game, you'll go into the tutorial, and you cannot change the options after the tutorial starts until you get like a part way through it, because it just like locks you out of using the pause menu or a start menu. And so basically, make sure all your settings are set up before you go in there. That's just kind of an oversight. That doesn't have anything to do with the port. It's just the game itself, and it's just kind of an oversight. But yeah, make sure to set your settings beforehand, because it's important. Anyways, back to thing. I've been running it in borderless. I haven't had any problem with full screen or borderless mode. Screen resolution, like I was mentioning, since it doesn't describe any of these, I'm going to go ahead and explain all these, which I normally don't do, but let's go ahead and go through it anyways. Screen resolution is actually the resolution that the game will render at, and so this is how you're able to improve performance if you don't want to run it full resolution. So let's say your graphics card is pretty weak, you can lower the resolution. 4 is going to be your max. It's going to be 100%, so it'll just render to whatever resolution your monitor is, and then you could go down, which is going to be 75%, about 50%, and then about 20 to 25%. It looks abysmal when you get this low, but I'm used to it at always full resolution. I'm just running at full resolution because I can handle it. But if you are having performance problems, this is going to be your major saver next to post-processing and probably distance, I would say. And then you get anti-aliasing. No idea what type of anti-aliasing this is. However, if you put it on 1, the game gets super blurry, so I assume it forces anti-aliasing, and it's going to be FXAA if you have it on 1, and no idea what these other settings are. I'm going to assume 4 is going to be MSAA, like 4 times or something along those lines. Somewhere around there would seem about right. I have to guess because the game doesn't actually tell you. Distance is render distance. Have it on 4. The game has terrible render distance, anything lower than 4. But from 4, you can actually see things pretty far away, and you can actually use it in gameplay. Shadow, I'm not really sure what 3 and 4 the differences are. I'm assuming like it just looks fine, but if you put it on 1, it's just a circle under your feet. 2 is pretty blocky, so keep it on 4 if you want good quality. Texture, yeah, let's just turn off all the textures and everything will appear pink. The default, Unreal Engine 4 color. No, this actually isn't turning on and off textures. What it's doing is it's actually turning on the render distance textures, as in long distance textures. If you turn it on, it will just use full size textures, I believe. If you turn it off, you get a ton of weird pop in, and I'll talk about that a little bit later once we actually get into gameplay. But for the most part, you'll just want this on if you want the game to look the best. Otherwise, you're going to get some pop in. However, you can save performance this way. One thing that is nice about all these options is you're able to save, a lot of performance. If you are having trouble running the game, you can actually save a lot of kind of heavyweight stuff and just turn everything down, which is kind of nice and wasn't always the case in the other Neptunia games. Effects, this is like attacks and things like that, and item shines and things. And then post-processing affects all the lighting and motion blur, which is a little bit unfortunate. I do not really like motion blur, and this game has some of it. It's not terrible, but it does make things look a little bit kind of blurry in gameplay, which is a little bit unfortunate. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, so it would be really nice to be able to have separate options such as motion blur, depth of field, and that sort of stuff, and be able to turn it off individually. But having it just post-process and have some quality options there is, I guess, better than nothing. And then VSync, I never even turned it off. I mean, I just left it on because basically I don't want tearing. I hate tearing, and it seems to be running perfectly fine. I'm not noticing any sort of input lag or anything along those lines. Multiple volume sliders, which is super, super nice. One thing I didn't like is that the BGM or background music is extremely loud in the entire game, and it plays at the same volume in basically every single scene, and it is extremely loud. So I had to turn it down to 70% so that I could hear people actually talking in the game's dialogue, because otherwise it was just overbearing. So I ended up turning that down. Everything else is balanced perfectly fine, and it's got some nice, selection of volume sliders there. I would have liked to see some adjusting volume settings like they had in Mega Dimension, but unfortunately they didn't end up porting those over, which is unfortunate. This is going to be like gameplay display stuff, so distance is going to be your camera distance. I prefer 2 because of some of the close range stuff. We'll talk about those a little bit later. And then you get your direction. I have no idea what this does. I literally have no idea. I turn it off and on and I have no idea what it does. And then you get minimap rotation, or minimap display, which is basically enhanced. It's just going to be larger, smaller, and smaller. And then you actually have the chat log as well, which once again I'll talk about that. That's not actually multiplayer chat log. Well, it is, but like once again, we'll talk about it later. Minimap rotation. Button configuration, you can rebind everything on the keyboard and mouse, which is good because the keyboard and mouse default controls make absolutely no sense. Like you'll see like camera resets and things like that, which it expects you to play with just the keyboard, I believe, but you can use the mouse to control the camera. However, it's inverted by default, but you can end up changing that in the etc. settings. But another complaint I have about this is you can't absolutely rebind everything on the gamepad. One thing that I would like to be able to kind of change is the open skill set button. Now, in most action RPGs that I play, they have these toggle buttons, basically, and normally it's the right bumper or like a left trigger or something, so I'm used to using those. I keep accidentally using items because it's left bumper instead of right bumper, and I want to swap it, but you can't. For whatever reason, you just can't swap that, which is a little bit frustrating, but you can rebind pretty much everything else. One problem that is going to be noticed by a lot of people is if your controller is not configured properly. I know some people have been having problem with like Steam controllers having like, just like the movement doesn't work properly, which I actually had that problem in another game I have a video coming up of. But basically, it seems to be a driver issue, but it just, if it doesn't configure properly, like your D-pad doesn't configure properly or something like that, you're screwed, which is just super unfortunate. But you can obviously use some sort of key rebinding feature or something along those lines outside of the game to fix that. It's just really unfortunate you can't rebind those, which is why we like to rebind controllers, because we like to fix things if it's broken. But overall, it's pretty good options, especially with the keyboard and mouse stuff there, because once again, the default bindings are absolutely ridiculous. And then you get autosave, which is super, super nice. And then you get the invert. Now, mine defaulted to being reversed, which was a little bit strange. And I think the reason is because the mouse will actually be vertically inverted. Also, this has full mouse control as well. All the menus do, except for when you're in town. I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then you get speed, which is going to be your camera speed, and then you get vibration setting, which is super nice to see, and text language. You can actually see in the background there, it will actually change live, and this includes the voices as well. So you can swap it at any time during gameplay, and it'll just swap the voices right over, which is super, super cool. And I don't know why it changes the font whenever I go to Chinese, but there you go. That's the thing. So if you speak Chinese, then you get a text language, or read Chinese. Sorry, they have 2 different languages. But yeah, I personally don't like the Japanese voice acting. I prefer the English voice acting, but both, like, quality-wise are perfectly fine. I haven't noticed any, like, clipping or anything along those lines, and it's balanced really, really well in this game. So, yeah. So, do I want to save? No, because I don't actually know if I changed anything. Anyways, let's go ahead and go into gameplay and talk about the port, because the port, gameplay-wise, aside from that menu sort of setup and some of the options kind of not being separated, it's kind of annoying. Also, I did mention one thing about the keyboard and mouse. You can't use the mouse in this area, which is the hub area. Oops, I accidentally exited because I clicked. But yeah, you have to use WASD to navigate this, which is super annoying, but you can open up a shortcut just to go to everything, and WASD doesn't work in the menus. It's a little bit strange, but the mouse does. Sorry to do a second editor note here, but I was in the forums while I was kind of waiting for things to kind of set up for my editing and stuff, and people have been complaining about the multiplayer, because the game does have multiplayer. I'm not sure if I mentioned it in the video. I haven't edited it all yet, but basically they've been noticing some weird latency issues, and a lot of people are blaming the netcode. I personally have been able to play multiplayer perfectly fine. There's some stuttering issues here and there to where people were just kind of juddery, but for the most part, the multiplayer works perfectly fine, and I have actually had no problems whatsoever with it. Now, to be fair, I haven't had friends playing with me. I've been playing with random people and stuff, but do keep that in mind that if you have some network weird issues and things, or maybe your network's not particularly amazing, it might have some issues here and there, or maybe it's a problem with ISPs. It is a peer-to-peer connection system, so maybe certain people just don't connect properly, and I was just lucky. I don't know, but I've been able to join games and I've been able to host games perfectly fine and have no issues. So keep that in mind, though. Online community is not particularly going to be large for this game very long anyway, so it's mostly going to be a single-player game, but there you go. Anyways, back to the thing. Now, this is only a problem because when we go into gameplay, I'm not going to talk about all this other gameplay stuff. I'm just going to go straight into gameplay. And I don't want to go here because I think that's going to have story stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and go to, I guess, the Logi Mountain. Let's go for it. This is a lava area. I'll try and swap over to a new area just to show off some of the more visual effects. But yeah, so I just accidentally moved my mouse. That's why the camera did that. But you will notice when I loaded in, there was a little bit of pop-in. This game does have some texture pop-in that happens here and there, and I think that's just a problem with the game and the way they ended up making it load. They didn't seem to do any prefetching or anything along those lines. They didn't use any sort of loading screen overlay when they actually get into a level, and so you're gonna see a little bit of pop-in. And I did notice one thing that is sort of annoying. Once again, this is a problem with the game itself and not port specific, but you'll load into like an area and then it has like a cutscene, but you'll end up seeing part of the level or under the level or something like that before the cutscene ends up playing, which it's just like a lack of polish. But yeah, as I was talking about with the mouse and keyboard controls, one thing that is kind of strange is, you got the mouse, which is going to be it's inverted vertically for whatever reason, and I have to go and set it to reverse, but then my controller is inverted. Now I'm playing with a controller, and I highly recommend playing with a controller because it is an action RPG, and the other reason is left click will attack. All right, cool. Right click will end up blocking, and WASD moves, right? What's a jump? Jump is K on the other side of the freaking keyboard. How am I supposed to use the mouse and use that at the same time? Attack on the keyboard, however, is I, and they did actually have a separate binding for that. So you can't actually rebind the mouse, but you can rebind the keyboard. So I think it expects you to be using the kind of keyboard exclusively for this. However, you can completely customize it so you can play it with just whatever you want. So yeah, keyboard controls are actually pretty fluid though. I haven't noticed anything along the lines of like weird input lag or weird acceleration. This is the first Neptunia game that hasn't had any sort of mouse acceleration, by the way, which is super, super nice. And so yeah, it controls smoothly. So the port is actually fairly decent and it performs extremely well on my machine. Some people on lower end machines have had problems, but that's just to be expected when a game releases on Steam these days. Just people try to play games on laptops and stuff like that. This game is a little bit heavier than I thought it was going to be. I will say that it is a little bit more performance heavy. However, you do have a lot to customize it, and I can get this thing down to only using like 10% of my CPU or 10% of my GPU, sorry, by setting down everything to the absolute lowest. So this will run on lower end machines. Just don't expect to have solid frame rates because the game, especially if you want it to look decent, is going to have some good catch-up stuff that's just going to have, a weird frame rate issue. You're going to have drops here and there, especially when other effects end up going on. This is an Unreal Engine 4 game, however, and so they can end up patching in some performance, stuff like that. One thing I did notice with the camera and stuff like that, sometimes the bounds are a little bit strange, and so you'll get really close up to your character's face for no apparent reason. Once again, that's just a problem with the game. Any other problems I've had with the port specifically? Not really. Aside from what I already mentioned with the sort of controls and some of the options being a little bit vague and not having separated options, all my problems with the game are just problems with the game itself. Going on into my impressions of the game so far, I'm only about 2 hours in, so I definitely don't have enough information to do a full review. But as a Neptunia fan, I actually like it quite a bit, and I feel like there's a huge lack of action RPGs. So I personally love action RPGs. I feel like they're one of my favorite genres. And so I really like to see good action RPGs, and this is a fairly decent one. It's a little bit more on the simpler side. It doesn't have a lot of in-depth mechanics, as most action RPGs don't. Most action RPGs do kind of rely on stats, but you do actually have a nice selection of skills, and you're able to go through and select a bunch of them. So if I go ahead and go into my skill set, you actually have two things, and Neptune just got a healing skill. So sweet. But you can actually swap through skill sets, and it actually has a nice variety of your skill sets and stuff like that. And each character plays differently. They end up, mixing up the characters and what they end up doing. So Neptune is using a sword because that's just who she is. She's going to do what she does. But other characters and stuff like Neptune or Noir. Wow, I'm just completely screwing up my words at this point. Neptune oh my god, I did it again. Noir has a spear, for example, and Vert is actually using rapier. Blonde is actually a priest, and the other characters kind of mess things around as well. Like Uni is using twin pistols instead of a rifle, and this time around they're inside of an MMO, and so they're able to kind of mix up what the characters are doing because of that. So it's like, oh hey, I'm playing a class I don't actually play in real life, basically. And they do a lot of weird sort of, self-referential stuff. This is a game specifically for fans, however. So if you're not a fan of Neptunia, there's a lot of story bits that you're just gonna miss. There are tons of references, tons of cameos, and just tons of references to the other games and jokes that they've had in the past, especially character quirks. And so if you haven't played the previous ones, they do a simple little explanation to where it's like, oh, hey, this is who this character is, and this is kind of how they play and stuff like that. And so that's kind of nice. I'm going to go ahead and switch over my party, which you can actually switch over your party members whenever you want, which is kind of cool. The experience is based on whoever is in combat. And so if you end up wanting characters, I'm just going to go ahead and switch up all the characters. If you want to actually level all your characters evenly, one complaint I do have about the game is that it doesn't show you what level they are when you're actually in this menu. And navigating the menus is a little bit annoying without the mouse. mouse, but again, playing with the mouse is kind of annoying. And so, yeah, it's a little bit weird. I actually like the menu navigation with the mouse as well, which, if you want to talk about the port stuff, I feel like the mouse is the superior menu navigation. It actually works really, really smoothly. Same with the camera and stuff, but again, controller is superior for, games like this, generally speaking, especially with the default key bindings. I'm too lazy to change. But yeah, so the game itself is actually pretty good. I'm enjoying it so far as a Neptunia fan. If you're not a Neptunia fan, it might interest you just because it's an action RPG. Again, it is a genre that doesn't have a lot of games in it, or at least not a lot of high quality games, and a lot of them are pretty short. I have been told that this game is fairly short as well, which is a little bit unfortunate to hear, but again, I'll end up playing through it and actually doing a full review. So if you end up kind of curious about that, I will have a full review out eventually. So if you're not a Neptunia fan, then go ahead and wait for that review, and I will just have everything that the game has to offer, and it'll basically be talking about everything in depth. So far, the story isn't too crazy or anything. It's actually pretty lighthearted, and I wouldn't actually be against the story being that way for, the entirety of it. Although I do have a feeling some sort of drama is going to end up picking up because it's a JRPG, of course, and it's one that takes place inside of a game. So we're literally playing a game inside of a game, and I'm sure there's going to be some weird referential stuff and stuff. Yeah. Gameplay-wise, it runs extremely smooth. I enjoy the gameplay quite a bit. It's a little bit more on the simpler side, but like I said, you have a nice selection of skills, and you can end up switching up whatever you want. All the characters play completely differently. However, it is mostly just spamming X on enemies, and then the occasional skill whenever you want to deal more damage. You do have a dodge and a block. If you end up blocking in the right time, you end up getting a just counter and stuff. So it's, it's got some more advanced features that weren't in the previous Action Neptunia games. However, it's actually an action RPG that is good, which is actually pretty nice, which the previous Neptunia games, while they were fun and they were kind of nice time killers and they had some nice personality to them, especially with the story, and they were ridiculous because, it's a Neptunia game. They are ridiculous. This one, has all that personality. It has that nice originality. My God, the game is a little bit hard to jump up on things every once in a while because you get stuck on stuff so easily. The game does have some polish issues, but the personality is there, and they did a good job of making all the characters unique. Like, they really stepped up their game when they ended up making this one. Oops, I bound the same skill to multiple buttons. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Oh, I'll worry about that later. Yeah, overall, if you're a Neptunia fan, it's a decent game. I'll go ahead and use an item so that I can get out of here and go to a different area just so I have some nice B-roll for my other stuff. But yeah, if you're a Neptunia fan, this game is actually pretty good. If you like... Wait, is it going to go? Okay, there it goes. Some of the loading screens are kind of weird. Like I said, it doesn't really have loading transitions. It just kind of goes. And so that's a little bit strange as well. But that's just, once again, all my problems with the game are just problems with the game itself. And some of the camera stuff and just the camera work is kind of weird. Some of the AI is kind of weird. Like when I run, like the characters just kind of float around. Sometimes they end up getting stuck in AI stuff. And I noticed with some of the presets, you're actually able to change their tactics. Oops. I didn't mean to do that. You can actually go into tactics and you're able to change it based on like character personality or whatever, you want. So you can end up prioritizing in boss fights and stuff, which is kind of cool. But I've noticed some of the AI kind of hiccups here and there. And, once again, my problems with the game are just the game itself. But overall, if you're a Neptunia fan, it's definitely worth a shot. I think it was only $40 when I ended up picking it up. I didn't actually pay attention to the price. I just bought it because it's Neptunia, and that's the nerd I am now. That's just my life. But yeah, and some of the notes about the camera and stuff like that. The camera's pretty bad in close range areas, but you are able to change it in the options. So if I go ahead and go into the config here, if I wanted to go into display, I forgot to show this off earlier. But yeah, you can actually make the camera go pretty far. Whoops, I hit start instead of B. Oh my God, sometimes these menus, I'm just terrible with them. But yeah, you can actually have the camera super far away. One thing to mention is that in the tutorial, you can't actually change the options. I forgot to mention this at the beginning of the video. I'll probably end up doing an edit cut in there because that is fairly important. But I keep forgetting because I only did the tutorial once, obviously. But when you start off the game and you go into the tutorial, you can't actually change the options until you get a certain percentage through the tutorial because it just doesn't allow you to open up the menus. But yeah, you're able to customize quite a bit in the camera options here. So that's kind of nice as well. So depending on how you like it, I like it closer up just because of these closer range segments. Your camera can get stuck on stuff, and I don't really like having it too far. I feel like it's very action oriented when it's closer up. I just feel like I'm much more ingrained in the action, immersed in the world, I guess you could say. But yeah, anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this one. And you can also end up checking out my review when it ends up coming out. Subscribe for that if you end up wanting a full review. Maybe you don't want to pick it up right away and you want to wait a little bit. It does have a launch sale, but if you are questioning on this, maybe you don't have a high-end PC or anything and you want to just kind of wait on it. I mean, Steam does have a review policy, but I don't like using reviews because it kind of hurts developers and stuff. But yeah, it's a decent game. If you're looking for a fun Neptunia game, it has all the personality. The story so far hasn't picked up, but it might in the future. And, all the characters and stuff like that are nice and unique. And yeah, yeah, it's just a good Neptunia game, which is kind of nice, and I'm glad that Compile Heart and Tamsoft actually stepped up their game, because the other action-based games were not particularly great, aside from, you know, some of the story just being fun and interesting. But yeah, like I said, I'll see you guys in the next video. I am going to be probably playing this for the next few hours, and then I got a video on Puyo Puyo Tetris to get to, because I ended up getting that on PC as well, but I wanted to play this one first. I actually haven't played Puyo Puyo Tetris yet, and even though I downloaded that one first, I haven't played it yet, and I'm actually really excited. I really hope the port on that one is good, because I swear to God, if that one's not a good port, I'm going to be very upset with Sega, because, oh my God, I've been wanting a Puyo game on PC for, like, ever, and so... yeah, I'm kind of scared, but I'll be trying that in a few hours, so that video will be out tomorrow if you're watching this on release and stuff, but... yeah, like I said, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Oh God, what the hell? I didn't realize, like, a mini-boss is going to be in this section. What the hell?